share. The Mama Papa, about Ghana, yes, soon you may do so. I'm regular host, I'm a Veroni. Do or die and send that H.U. I go for a brea, I bet you why we are from her. Now, a bit more so agent as to say, any idiomatic expression, a idiotic expression. Sassam we say, former MP for Tamale Central, while found a trial, as a man the Yapa. Now, what channel General Pan African TV, a large and a large so. Me, you know, Massam, it's me jam, one more correct, near or chair, like a farmer. Now, one Casamun decided to say, as some more can a woman I say,
in 1979, there was a coup in Ghana. The coup d'etat was led by late President J.J. Rawlings. And there was unanimous acceptance of the coup d'etat. People poured onto the streets to celebrate the coming of J.J. He was even rechristened. J.J. stands for Jerry John. It was in 1979 that he was rechristened Junior Jesus. Why? Because he had come as a savior. Why did he come as a savior? Because after the overthrow of Buzia on 13 January 1972, the military had made it virtually impossible for democratic activities to take place in this country. They had constricted the democratic space, and you were either with them or against them. So there was no way the people of this country could get the military off. There was no way. In fact, don't even discount the aborted attempt in 1978 by late General R.K. Achampong to entrench his government by coming out with a ridiculous concept of governance called union government. Don't discount it. That was just an attempt by the military to entrench themselves in power. So there was no avenue. We as civilians could not demonstrate and go to the bush with guns to fight the military. So when Jerry John Rawlings came, he was a savior. In military rules. And that's why nobody should support it in principle. There's no accountability. So from 1972 to 1992, all military rules, have you known between that time and 1992 how much money Ghana made? How much tax revenue we generated? Do you know? How much gold we sold? Do you know? This is why we can't support military rule. There's no transparency. There's no accountability. Power doesn't derive from the people. So that the people, there can be democratic accountability. So why is the coup in Guinea? I've had written on the constitution a framework of governance to acquire power. He was quite clear at the time that he sought to be president of Guinea that Guinea had a two-term limit. Two-term limit. He knew it. He campaigned elections based on promise to the people to abide by the constitution. Protect the constitution and uphold the country. After the expiration of the two-term, or before the expiration of the two-term, he thought that he had a divine right in power by manipulating constitutional provisions through his support base within the country to add self. discounted the regular military forces because they were, and he forces and police could protect him. So he set up, it is who's special forces to protect him. Mahama Doumbouya was even in the French legionary in France. He recalled him to come and head it and be his personal bodyguard. But even Mamadi could not close his eyes to the rot, the suffering, the human rights abuses, the corruption, the unaccountability of this. Do you know that Guinea is a significant producer of bauxite, which is a necessary ingredient for aluminium? Do you know that the coup has increased the price of bauxite on the world market? Do you know that about the chief producer of gold on the African continent? Where are all the resources? The people in Guinea are living in misery. That Africa inordinate desire to hang on power. So where all democratic space is closed, where avenues for a change of government are, the Mamadi says the military will have to come in. Quoting Rollins, the military will have to come in to secure the people their freedom. That was why even in Alpha Conde's hometown, the people, his own people, celebrated his overthrow. His own people. So many years ago, when I was preparing to enter University of Ghana, I read a governance book. At the time, you know, at the A levels, this government, not politics. And the writer, I've forgotten his name, made a fundamental statement that charismatic leaders emerge when you have weak institutions. When you have weak institutions. That's why Obama, when he came to Africa, said we should invest in institutions and persons. Because if the institutions are weak, then the leader just provides leadership. It doesn't become charismatic. So when you find leaders carrying cocoa, jumping into the gutters, trying to direct traffic, those things that people say, oh, this our leader is good, is charismatic. Institutions that were responsible for doing that work that he's doing and providing leadership are weak. So the institutions in Guinea, which ought to have provided the checks and balances against the abuse of power, inordinate and nauseous abuse of power, were weak. The course in Guinea, what did they say about Alpha Conde's attempt to amend the constitution? Hadn't they a bulwark for the protection of the civil and political rights of the people in Guinea? What did they say? Or were they also part of the governance arrangement of Alpha Conde, that, like the three monkeys, they saw nothing wrong, they heard nothing wrong, and they said nothing wrong? Was it so? Parliament itself, the institution that represents the people themselves, how did they go back to see people of their constituencies suffering, unable to afford 3 square meals a day? How did they hold the executive accountable for the use of public resources to alleviate the sufferings of the people? Yesterday I was listening to a report which said that one of the major issues that will confront Mamadi is how to introduce social projects poverty alleviation projects that would alleviate the suffering of the people. An admission of the fact that under Alpha Conde, the people were really poor. So this is why that provided the basis for the coup. And I hope that this becomes a lesson for the African leaders. I just don't understand. I just don't understand. Even Jesus Christ had people to succeed him in the mission to spread the gospel. Not so. So that's why we have Peter, Paul, Mark, and Luke. Not so. Because they were disciples. And so they were following Jesus Christ and learning. So you must know that you cannot be there all the time. Somebody must take over and continue with the work. Just like the caliphs in Islam. Somebody ought to be there. Because the Holy Quran tells us that every life, every living being, everything that breathes must underline, taste death. So Alpha Conde ought to have known that a time will come when he will close his eyes. So if you think that you are the only person who can provide for the prosperity of Guinea, what about when the time when you will close your eyes comes? How will you fight it to remain alive? That is why when you have a constitutional arrangement that provides for, as a check, that provides for term limits as a check on abuse of power and the creation of opportunities for the people of a country, future presidents of a country, you don't close that opportunity. You don't. And I hope Nana Akufo-Addo will not close the opportunity, will not attempt, in our case. But just like in all cases, not so. The chapter of the Constitution dealing with the executive is entrenched. Well, you can't touch it. That was a song by, I forgot it, MC Mahama. Now, what I'm saying is that even in Guinea, there was the bastardization of the referendum for the purposes of the change. So, yes, but I hope that ECOWAS leaders are watching and learning. But they are slow learners. Because it happened in the Côte d'Ivoire. And when we appeared on your network, we had said that, I mean, it's ironic. Côte d'Ivoire, the leader of Côte d'Ivoire, the president of Côte d'Ivoire, was prevented from contesting for the presidency of Côte d'Ivoire, even though he had held the position of prime minister of Côte d'Ivoire before, on the basis of the fact that he was not a native Ivorian. Everybody thought that this was absurd. How can a non-native rise to the position of prime minister and not become president? But yes, but when we all supported him, Alassane Ouattara, to become president of Côte d'Ivoire, what did he do? He first of all announced a successor because he did not want to violate the term limits. And when his successor died of an unexpected and unfortunate heart attack, he announced himself as candidate. And then he's still a member of the club. I do not know if he's part of the delegation to Guinea, what he will tell Mamadi. They will tell him in his face that the thing that he did in Côte d'Ivoire is what they are resisting in Guinea. Now, but the ECOWAS clearly is a president club. A club for the presidents of Africa. or West Africa. It's a club. They have never been proactive in matters of this nature. Even though chapter 5 or so of the charter, particularly article 4J, talks about the promotion and consolidation of democratic governance in member countries. That is a charter that provides the basis for ECOWAS saying that we will not tolerate coup d'etats. If you come to power through undemocratic means, you cannot be part of the club. But they always fail to see the warning signals that what is happening can lead to an undemocratic usurpation of power. Or, I mean, any usurpation of power will be undemocratic. So it will be an undemocratic usurpation of power. So I think that it is time that ECOWAS leaders become proactive. So when we conducted elections and 9 people lost their lives needlessly, ECOWAS leaders should have told President Nana Akufo-Addo that that is unacceptable. People cannot queue to exercise their democratic right to elect the leaders of a country and die as a result. And that probably, if it continues under his watch and there's egregious abuse of human rights in his country, sanctions might be imposed, maybe personally on him, to get him to sit up. Because the embarrassment and the reputational damage that comes with the imposition of personal sanctions on you will be so embarrassing. And so they ought to be proactive. But leaders, ECOWAS leaders themselves, sometimes when they assume the mantle of power, I mean, act in ways that gives you reason to question whether they are rational in their thinking. Look at what is happening in Sierra Leone or in Gambia. A government that rode on the fact that they were going to hold Yahya Jammeh's government accountable and won the elections massively has decided to enter into an alliance with Yahya Jammeh's party. Where there is accountability, where there is accountability, thrown to the dogs. Thrown to the dogs, and establish a Truth and Reconciliation Commission because they wanted to hold Yahya Jammeh's government accountable. What happens to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission? So these are African leaders, are the way they behave. Always junketing in planes to meetings, and sometimes holding virtual meetings, and talking and laughing their big men laugh. That is all. It is all. But to conclude, let me say clearly that the restoration of democratic governance in Guinea is a sine qua non for the support of the West African people of the military junta. Because we want to be able to hold our leaders accountable. We want a government that we can say that we put them in power. We don't want a government that comes to power by its own force. Even though on the West African region, in the West African region, governments have manipulated elections to come to power. But still, they can say that their people voted them into power. We want such a government. Guinea has tremendous potential. So it is important to have a civilian governance and build and empower all the institutions of governance to hold the executive accountable so that Guineans can benefit from the resource wealth of the people. And that's why I think that the visit of the ECOWAS leaders or a delegation of ECOWAS to Guinea on Thursday or so was in the right direction. One, to engage with the military junta on the roadmap to the restoration of civilian rule in Guinea. It's important. And two, to check on the health of the former leader, Alpha Conde. And so, yes, as ECOWAS leaders, if your former colleague is now in distress, it only stands to reason that you go to see how he's faring. So good, they've gone, that's a moral humanitarian gesture. And then to legally, Guinea has to take steps to join the club of democratic elected governments in the ECOWAS. And so I believe that this meeting will yield fruitful results. Dembe himself, even though he's very popular now, it is not in his interest to try to manipulate the process to stay in power for long. In 40 years, he's already scarred, because even if he leaves, how is he going to? He has to be decommissioned from the army. He cannot be part of the army any longer. You can't have a former head of state obey orders from another head of state. So the problem of Guinea will be how to deal with Mamadi if he finally hands over power to a civilian rule. What is most likely to happen is that because of his popularity, he might simply down the military gap and take civilian clothing and probably transit into a civilian government.
Already, there are reports that is quoting Jerry John Rawlings. Thank you.
Ghana this year, said the opinion Inusah Fuseini, SCE, former MP for Tamale Central. Na dwenchira o kire efa do or die expression na ene amaye kasa bebree say no see wona ne adwana na nya adwane. Drop your comments in our comment section. Na wo kwada bia 10 am sharp. Ghana yenso dwumedie ne besen aba on bio. So don't forget to subscribe our YouTube channel. Na like our social media handles no so. I am regular host Ama Veronini. Medama se mo jebrehwe. Bye.